Welcome to the silent screams, where the quiet isn't peace. It's a warning. Every story you'll hear here is said to be true, whispered by those who lived to tell it, and by those who didn't. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because the things you're about to hear aren't just stories, they're the echoes of real nightmares. Pause, faint sound of a distant scream, then whisper. This is the silent screams. The road to Millfield, Ohio, was quiet, too quiet for a woman like Sarah Miller, who had spent the last year drowning in noise. The city had been a constant reminder of everything she'd lost: the accident, the hospital, the endless condolences that blurred into pity. So when she saw the small two-story house on Willow Lane, white paint peeling, a porch swing creaking in the wind, she thought it looked peaceful. Peaceful was exactly what she needed. The realtor was an older man, kind but oddly nervous. He fumbled with the keys, saying the place had been unoccupied for a few years. When he finally opened the door, a wave of cold air rolled out, stale, earthy, like something had been trapped inside too long. Sarah ignored it. Anything was better than that apartment filled with memories of her husband's laughter. Inside, the house was strangely still. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, tiny blue flowers curling away at the edges, and the wooden floors sighed beneath every step. Noah, her 8-year-old son, ran through the hallway, his laughter echoing through the emptiness. For a brief second, Sarah smiled. Maybe this could really be a new start. As they walked upstairs, the realtor cleared his throat. "Just make sure you keep that window locked," he said, pointing to the one facing the street. "The latch doesn't hold very well. Sometimes it opens on its own." Sarah nodded absent-mindedly, brushing it off. Old houses made noises. Windows stuck or creaked. Nothing unusual. That night, after unpacking the last of the boxes, Sarah stood outside looking at the house from across the street. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. Through the upstairs window, the one the realtor mentioned, she thought she saw Noah's shadow move. But when she walked inside, he was fast asleep. Still, when she went to close that same window, the latch was already undone. The breeze that slipped through was cold, almost sharp. Sarah exhaled, securing it tightly and whispering to herself, "Just the wind." But the moment she turned off the light and walked away, the window creaked softly and opened again. It started 3 nights after they moved in. Sarah woke to the sound of whispering, soft, rhythmic, almost like a lullaby being hummed through the walls. She sat up, listening. The house was still, but the sound persisted, coming from upstairs, from Noah's room. She climbed the stairs carefully, every step protesting beneath her feet. The hallway was dim moonlight, spilling through the open window at the far end. A cold draft crawled across her skin. When she reached Noah's door, she saw him standing by the window, his tiny silhouette framed in the silver light. "Noah," she whispered. He didn't turn round. He was whispering, slow, deliberate, to someone outside. His voice was calm, as though he was having a conversation. Sarah's breath hitched. "Honey, who are you talking to?" He finally turned to her, his eyes half open, face pale in the moonlight. "The man outside," he said simply. "He waves at me every night." Sarah froze. "What man?" Noah blinked. "He said he lives here too. He told me not to tell you." The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, thick and unmoving. Sarah rushed to the window and looked out, but there was nothing, only the empty street below, quiet and still. The nearest street lamp flickered once, dimmed, then steadied again. She shut the window hard, locking it twice this time. "It's just a dream," she said, forcing a smile. "No one's out there, sweetheart." Noah frowned, as if she didn't understand. "He doesn't come from outside, Mom. He comes from the wall." Sarah's hands trembled. "What did you say?" But before he could answer, a sharp knock echoed from inside the wall. Just once, deep, hollow, deliberate. Noah's eyes lit up in recognition. "He's back," he whispered. Sarah yanked him away from the window, heart pounding. But as they left the room, she heard it again, a faint scraping sound behind the plaster, like fingernails dragging across wood. When she looked back, the window she had locked was wide open once more, curtains swaying gently, as if someone had just stepped through. For the next few days, Sarah tried to ignore it. The window, the whispers, Noah's strange behavior. She blamed it on stress, exhaustion, or the weight of grief that still lingered in her chest, like fog that never lifted. But every night, as the clock struck past midnight, she began to hear it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, and deliberate, coming from the attic above Noah's room. At first, she thought it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a bird trapped up there. But when she finally gathered the courage to check, she found the attic door locked from the inside. The key that hung on the hook beside it was rusted, old, as if it hadn't been touched for years. That night, she lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each creak of the floorboards above her. 1 step, 2 steps, pause, another step. The rhythm was too measured, too human. She tried to convince herself it was the house settling, the wood expanding in the cold. But then she heard it, a dragging sound, something or someone moving across the attic floor. Sarah's breath caught. She looked toward Noah's room. His nightlight was still glowing faintly under the door, but the shadow of small feet moved beneath it. He was awake again. She tiptoed to his room, gently opening the door. Noah was sitting up, staring at the ceiling. "He's walking again," he whispered. Sarah tried to speak, but the words died in her throat when she heard it. The same footsteps, directly above them this time. Heavy, intentional, coming closer. "Noah, it's just the wind," she lied, pulling him into her arms. But the wind didn't walk in straight lines. The wind didn't stop and start again. The sound traveled across the ceiling until it reached the corner of the room and then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Sarah could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. She slowly looked up, half expecting the ceiling to give way. Then, from the attic, came a low creak, the unmistakable sound of someone kneeling down. And right after that, 3 slow knocks. 1, 2, 3. Each one echoed through the house, deep and hollow, vibrating through the floorboards beneath her feet. Noah buried his face into her shoulder and whispered, "He's looking for the open window again." Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the house to breathe again. By the end of the week, Sarah's nerves were frayed. She'd barely slept, living in a haze of fear and exhaustion. Every creak, every whisper of wind through the hallway made her tense. Noah had started drawing strange figures, tall, faceless shapes, standing by windows, and when she asked him why, he simply said, "Because that's where they stand." One afternoon, while searching the basement for a toolbox, Sarah noticed something odd behind a stack of dusty paint cans, a small, wooden crate wedged into the wall. It looked old, the kind of wood that splinters if you touch it. The lid was nailed shut, but curiosity outweighed fear. She pried it open with a hammer, the nails screaming as they came loose. Inside were dozens of letters, yellowed paper, tied with a brittle ribbon that disintegrated in her hands. The top letter was dated August 1956, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Callahan. The handwriting was neat, careful, and strangely desperate. "We hear him again. At the window. We've locked it, but it opens every night. He wants to come in. I told Daniel not to look, but he did, and now he says the man is inside the walls." Sarah's stomach turned. The next letter was worse, more frantic. The ink smeared by water or tears. "If you see him watching from the window, don't look back. If you do, he remembers you." Her hands shook as she flipped through the rest. Each one seemed to detail nights filled with scratching, whispers, and something moving through the walls. The final letter ended abruptly, mid-sentence. "He's closer now." I can hear the rest was blank, just a dark streak across the page. From above, a faint creak sounded. Sarah froze, clutching the bundle of letters to her chest. The footsteps again, slow, deliberate, crossing the attic floor. She turned toward the basement stairs, her breath shallow. Then she heard something new, a soft thud behind her. The crate she'd opened had shifted slightly, as if something had moved inside the wall behind it. The last line of the letter flashed in her mind. "If you see him watching, don't look back." Sarah stood perfectly still, the basement air cold and heavy. Then, against every instinct she had, she turned. For just a moment, she thought she saw an eye. Not human, not alive, just watching. Sarah stopped using the attic stairs. She couldn't bear the sound it made, the slow, deliberate creak above her ceiling that always came at the same time each night. She told herself the house was old, that noises were normal, but deep down she knew better. The letters had changed something. The moment she read them, it was as if the house knew she understood its language. It began subtly. The hallway mirror, the one she'd brought from her old apartment, kept fogging up on its own. She'd wipe it clean only for handprints to appear too small to be her own, too long-fingered to belong to Noah. At first, she thought it was condensation, tricks of light. But one evening, as she walked past the mirror carrying laundry, she saw it. Her reflection blinked half a second too late. She froze, staring into the glass. The reflection stared back, matching her every movement again until it smiled. A slow, wrong smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sarah stumbled backward, the basket hitting the floor with a dull thud. The reflection tilted its head, watching her, that unnatural grin spreading wider. Then, as suddenly as it began, the mirror went black like the light had drained from the glass itself. When she dared step closer, her reflection had returned, pale and trembling. But there was something else now behind her reflection. In the hallway's dimness stood a figure, too tall, too still, its face blurred like smoke. She turned around. Nothing. The hall was empty. But when she looked back at the mirror again, the figure was closer, standing just over her shoulder. Sarah covered the mirror with a blanket and dragged Noah into her room, locking the door. He didn't ask questions, he seemed to already know. He likes the mirrors, Noah whispered. He said they help him see. That night, she barely slept. Every sound from the hallway felt amplified, the creak of floorboards, the sigh of the walls, the faint sound of something brushing against the covered mirror. At 3:14 a.m. she woke suddenly. The blanket had slipped off the mirror. The glass was no longer black, it was glowing faintly, pulsing like something alive beneath the surface. And for the first time, she saw what was watching her, a face not human, but shaped like one pressed against the inside of the glass, its hollow eyes following her every breath. It was a grey morning when Sarah decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. The mirror incident had left her shaken, hollow-eyed from another sleepless night. Even Noah, once so bright and curious, now refused to leave her side. He no longer played, no longer laughed. He just stared at the walls, like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. That she stood on the porch. An elderly woman from across the street waved hesitantly. Sarah recognized her, Mrs. Dunley, the widow who always watered her flowers at sunrise. Today, she wasn't smiling. She approached slowly, eyes fixed on the house rather than Sarah. "I thought someone finally moved in," the old woman said softly. "I prayed no one would." Sarah forced a shaky smile. "You've lived here long, haven't you?" "Too long," Mrs. Dunley replied, her gaze drifting to the upstairs window, the same one that refused to stay closed. "I watched that house swallow a family whole." Sarah's chest tightened. "You mean the Callahans?" The old woman's lips trembled. "Yes, and the ones before them. It always starts the same way. The whispers, the window, the footsteps in the attic. Then one night, they just stop. The house goes quiet for years, until someone new moves in." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "What happened to them?" Mrs. Dunley hesitated, her hands trembling as she clutched her coat tighter. "They found them all sitting in the living room, eyes open, looking at the wall." She paused, voice cracking. But there was no wall there, just the mirror. The air between them grew heavy. Somewhere inside the house, a door creaked open. Sarah turned instinctively, but nothing moved. Mrs. Dunley's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know why the window won't stay shut?" Sarah shook her head. "Because he comes and goes through it," she said. "The man in the wall, the one who watches." Before Sarah could respond, Mrs. Dunley stepped back, her face pale. "If you see him, don't speak. Don't look at him through glass. That's how he remembers you." Then, without another word, the old woman crossed the street, never once turning her back on the house. Sarah stood frozen on the porch. The air was colder now. The upstairs window creaked open slowly, as if answering her. And for the first time, she realized the house wasn't haunted, it was alive. That night, the house began to move, not with the gentle settling of wood or the harmless groan of old beams, but with something heavier, alive, deliberate, aware. Sarah woke to the sound of breathing, not hers, not Noah's, but something deeper, resonant, coming from inside the walls. The air was thick and unmoving. The room smelled of damp earth and metal, and the silence between each breath felt intentional, as though the house itself was listening. She reached for her phone. 3:14 a.m. The same time the footsteps had come before. The mirror in the hallway, still half covered by the blanket, began to hum softly, low and steady, like a pulse. Down the hall, Noah's door creaked open. She ran to him, her heart pounding, but stopped cold at the threshold. Noah was sitting on the floor, facing the wall. His small hands rested on his knees, and his lips were moving silently. "Noah," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Who are you talking to?" He turned to her slowly, his eyes wide, glassy, unblinking. "He's here now," he said softly. "He doesn't have to hide anymore." Before Sarah could move, the entire house ground a deep, shuddering sound that made the walls tremble. The lights flickered violently, the bulbs bursting one by one. The hum from the mirror grew louder, rising into a low, guttural vibration. Sarah grabbed Noah and pulled him away from the wall. But as she did, a line of cracks began to form across the plaster, thin at first, then widening, spreading like veins. From within came the faint sound of whispering, dozens of voices layered over each other, desperate, pleading. Then, the window upstairs slammed open. Cold air rushed through the hallway, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and rot. The walls began to creak in rhythm with the whispers, as if exhaling. Sarah ran toward the stairs, clutching Noah tightly. But halfway down, the floor shifted beneath her feet. The wooden boards flexed and groaned like muscle, like breath, and for the first time, she understood what Mrs. Dunley had meant. The house wasn't haunted. It wasn't holding spirits inside. It was the spirit, a living thing of grief and hunger, built from all who had died within its walls. As the front door slammed shut behind her, Sarah could swear she heard it whisper her name, not from inside the house, but from everywhere. The morning after the house came alive. Silence lingered like smoke. Every sound seemed swallowed before it reached her ears. Sarah barely remembered falling asleep, her mind fractured between exhaustion and terror. When she woke, Noah's side of the bed was empty. Her stomach dropped. "Noah." Her voice cracked through the still air. No answer. The house was too quiet. No creaks, no hums, no groans, just the sound of her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She checked the kitchen, the bathroom, even the backyard. Nothing. It wasn't until she reached the staircase that she saw it at the top step. Just outside Noah's room, his toys were lined up in a perfect circle, each one facing inward, toward the center, where his favorite stuffed bear sat alone. And there, against the window, were two small handprints pressed firmly on the glass from the inside. Sarah's voice trembled. "Noah, please, answer me." Her phone camera feed flickered to life as she opened the home security app. The screen showed Noah standing in his room. Relief surged through her until she realized the video wasn't live. It was recorded at 3:14 a.m. On the footage, Noah stood by the window, whispering to something unseen. Then, slowly, he turned toward the wall, the one now scarred with cracks from the night before. He reached out, pressing his small hand against it. The wall moved. It pulsed like flesh under paint. And then, without a sound, Noah sank into his body, disappearing inch by inch as the plaster rippled and closed over him. Sarah dropped the phone. The screen shattered on the floor, but the video kept playing, looping the same few seconds of Noah reaching toward the wall. Again and again, she clawed at the plaster until her fingers bled, screaming his name. The surface was solid, cold, unyielding, but behind it, she could hear faint scratching, small fingernails scraping, fading slowly into silence. And then, a whisper, so soft it barely reached her ears. "Mum." Sarah froze. The sound came from behind the wall. "It's dark in here." Her knees buckled. She pressed her face to the plaster, sobbing, "Hold on, baby. I'm here." But when she pulled back, the wall was smooth again, no cracks, no movement, no sound. Only one thing had changed. The reflection in the broken phone screen showed her own face, trembling, eyes wide with horror. And standing just behind her, in the reflection, was Noah. Sarah didn't remember falling asleep. One moment she was screaming at the wall, and the next, sunlight was cutting through the blinds like knives. She felt numb, her voice hoarse from hours of calling Noah's name. The house was silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. But she knew better now. The silence meant it was listening. She couldn't call the police. What could she say? That the walls had eaten her son, that she'd watched him vanish into the plaster. She felt madness creeping in with every breath. Yet beneath the fear, a single thought burned like a fever. If the house took him, then the house can give him back. So she went to work. She tore at the wallpaper with her bare hands, ripping through layer after layer until her fingers bled. Behind the paper, she found old boards painted shut. She pried them open with a hammer, her breath ragged, her heartbeat deafening in her ears. And behind those boards, she found a narrow corridor hidden within the walls. The air was heavy, cold, thick with dust. She squeezed inside, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The passage was no wider than her shoulders. The walls were lined with photographs. hundreds of them, each nailed directly into the wood. Her stomach turned as she realized what she was seeing. Every photograph showed a person standing at the same upstairs window, staring out. Some were recent, in color, others were sepia-toned, decades old. The expressions were all the same: blank, hollow, lifeless dot. Then she saw one that stopped her breath. It was her. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Her face, captured from outside the house. Through the second-floor window, she was holding Noah's stuffed bear. The date scribbled on the back read 2 days ago. Sarah stumbled backward, the beam of her flashlight shaking violently. The walls around her groaned, boards creaking as if the corridor itself was shrinking. And then she heard them. The whispers, dozens of voices overlapping, soft but urgent, like air being sucked through teeth. Don't look back. He sees you. He remembers you. The photographs began to rattle on the walls, their edges curling. Dust fell from the ceiling like ash. Sarah dropped the flashlight, its beam rolling across the floor, and in that brief moment of flickering light, she saw movement behind the photographs. Fingers, long, gray, and thin as roots, pressing out from behind the pictures, reaching toward her. Sarah screamed and ran, slamming into the boards at the end of the corridor, clawing for a way out. The voices followed, louder now, their words dissolving into a single, inhuman breath that filled the narrow space. Stay. The wood split beneath her hands, and she fell back into the living room, gasping, trembling, her clothes coated in dust. Behind her, the wall sealed itself again, smooth, perfect, as if it had never been open at all. The house was quiet again, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels wrong, heavy, suffocating, alive. Dust hung motionless in the air, catching what little light bled through the curtains. Sarah sat in the middle of the living room floor, her hands trembling, her mind hollow. She no longer knew how long she'd been there. Minutes, hours, maybe days. The clock on the wall had stopped at 3:14. She had tried everything. Every wall had been torn open, every floorboard ripped apart, every mirror shattered. Still, Noah did not return. The walls simply grew smoother, cleaner, like skin healing over a wound. Her phone, cracked and nearly dead, had begun recording on its own. The red light blinked faintly from where it had fallen earlier. Somewhere, a faint sound rose again. Not footsteps this time, but whispers, soft, rhythmic, almost familiar. "Mum." Sarah looked up sharply. The sound came from upstairs. Her legs trembled as she climbed the steps, each one groaning beneath her. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered, the air colder with every step. At the end stood Noah's door, slightly open, light spilling from within. She pushed it open. Noah was there, or something that looked like him. He stood by the window, his face turned toward the glass, his small hand pressed against it. But when she called his name, he didn't move. Her reflection appeared beside his in the window, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw herself smile. But the face in the glass was wrong, its eyes too dark, its grin too wide. Then Noah turned. His face was pale, his eyes empty, black as the space between walls. He whispered, "He says you can stay with us now." The window latch clicked open by itself. The wind howled, rattling the walls, carrying the faint echo of all the voices before her, men, women, children, each one whispering the same single word: watch. The floor beneath her feet began to sink, the walls flexing inward. She felt the pull, a slow, gentle suction like the house was inhaling her. Her last scream never left her throat. The sound was swallowed whole as the plaster rippled shut, smooth and silent. Downstairs, the phone continued recording. The screen flickered once, then stabilized, showing the living room, perfectly still. And in the reflection of the black TV screen, a woman could be seen standing at the upstairs window, watching.